Human beauty, is that important to you?
Terribly, yeah. It's not for no reason that I find myself painting portraits. I just love
But they're
painting.
often people who are not physically beautiful. Graham Richardson comes to mind.
Well, that's true.
I mean, something people think he's a good sort, but I'm not sexually aroused by him.
No, I wouldn't have described him as a good sort myself. But you see, that's a different kind of thing. I remember even as a kid sitting on the bus, and I'd look at all the faces on the bus and I'd think, gee, I'd like to draw that person. And that person didn't have to be beautiful. That just person had to have something about them themselves that was really interesting. And you can say with 100% confidence, if you ask yourself that question, you're sitting in a bus, there won't be a single person in that bus that you wouldn't like to do a painting or a drawing of. That's why people, when they say to me, who's the person you'd most like to paint?
Yeah.
I was thinking, I don't know. The nearest one at hand, I suppose. And every day I see something different. I never see the same thing twice. And I always think I could actually spend the rest of my life just painting images that I see, and I'd never tire of it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to top that story, but I have the same problem. I had the same problem for decades, and what will I write about? When I was doing 2 or 3 columns a week. And I once decided I was going to write about what was ever in the kitchen drawer. And I just opened the kitchen drawer and there were Lanchu coupons and rubber bands and broken pencils. And the same week that I wrote that, Paul Crocodile Dundee,
Hogan.
The same week that I wrote that, Paul Hogan did an identical sketch on the Hogan Show, and we sort of talked about it later. And that's the truth in it, isn't it? That there's an idea in anything and everything.
That's true.
And painters, look at the great painting that Rembrandt did of a side of beef, for example.
Exactly. And look at Cézanne. I mean, he just painted Mont Saint-Victoire. Over and over again. He didn't need to go and find another mountain.
The Haystack series
that's right.
of Monet.
Yeah. And Sisley too. He was a big Haystacks man.
Yeah, well, the Haystacks are pretty good. I'm wondering if we'd wired your brain up and we're watching all the little lights go off as you do a cartoon. I wonder if there'd be the same light display when you're doing a painting. Or is that a different procedure?
I think it's a totally different procedure, and I find it very difficult sometimes to make the transition from working as a cartoonist to going into the other room, which is the studio, and working as a painter, because the objectives are so different and the state of mind required is so radically different that sometimes making that transition takes a considerable amount of time. I actually have one of my little theories is the reason why so many of the great artists think Rembrandt, or think Picasso, Miro, all these people, a lot of them lived to very, very grand old ages. I mean, even Rembrandt, I think he lived till he was about 68, 70 something.
Wasn't a bad trot at the time.
Well, at the time, I think the average life expectancy in Amsterdam was something like about 35.
I think in Picasso's case, the other energising force was sex.
Well, it probably was, but he also painted all the time, and I think that when a painter is really involved in the work, the painter is in a sort of meditative state, because nothing else exists in the world except that surface that you're working on and the image that you're seeing coming to life in front of you. You are not thinking about anything else. And that's what meditation's all about, isn't it?
Wasn't Rembrandt thinking about the bills he had to pay? Aren't artists, in fact, just bombarded with the same problems as everyone else?
Of course.
Problems with the wife, problems with the kids.
Of course, but when he's actually doing the work, that's one of the things that differentiates the great work from the second-rate work. They might all have the same bills to pay, but not all of them create great art when they just approach the canvas. I don't think that Rembrandt, when he approached the canvas, thought, right, today I am going to do a great masterpiece that people will be marvelling at in 300 years' time. I think he thought he'd think something like, oh, that silly old bugger, from the Clothmakers Guild is coming around today and I've got to paint him, and oh, God, he's a boring old fart, But then he would engage in the process of painting that man with such intensity that everything else would be forgotten, and the result was a masterpiece.
You're painting a pretty good self-portrait of yourself tonight, and let's just dwell on Rembrandt for a minute. My favourite Rembrandts are the self-portraits, and you see them evolving from that cocky, smart ass with the feathers in his hat, full of piss and vinegar.
Yeah, he was.
So the ambition was naked, but the certainty that he was going to make it on the face. Yeah. And then towards the end, he looks like a poor old drunk. He's battered, he's weary, the face is clapped out, and there's a deep, deep, bitter knowledge in the eyes.
There's a deep sadness in there too.
Now, I think the older the paintings, the better in that sense.
I think he was doing his best paintings.
I can't think of you doing many self-portraits.
No, well, I think Rembrandt would revert to doing a self-portrait if there was no one else there to paint.
Well, there's always a mirror and there's yourself.
Well, that's right. And you're always available and you always turn up on time.
No, but mate, I think you're being devious here.
No, I'm not. I mean, right at the moment, my primary objective when it comes to painting is to paint a series of paintings of birds. So I was forever painting them on the walls of my house.
But it was a bird that got you into trouble on the balcony.
That's right. And I'm in this fortunate position of being surrounded by them, and I look at these wading birds directly across the road, and I just think I'm just mesmerised by them. And in a way, the wonderful thing about painting a bird, as distinct from just a landscape, right, is that when you engage by looking into the eye of a bird, it's a little bit like looking into the eye of a human being. You know that there's an active, albeit tiny, brain at work in there, and that bird has got personality, and that bird is completely unique.
It certainly animates the landscape in a way that rocks and trees on their own can't do.
I sometimes wish that I was a believer, because it'd be so easy to think, well, there was a God and he created all these beautiful landscapes, and our ability to appreciate them as beauty. We look at a landscape and we see these beautiful, sort of rolling hills and of beautiful trees, and you think, how beautiful is that? But then the closer you get to it, the more beautiful it becomes, because the trees have got decorations in them. I think of the birds as like the baubles on the Christmas trees. They are decorative, and they also provide the colour and the movement. They're like the dancing girls. They'd sing and they dance.
You used a three-letter word that I never mentioned. That's God. You raised it, so let's look at it.
Sorry, but I only, I was talking about it as a concept, as John Lennon would say.
Did you ever believe that God was more than a notion?
I could never accept it. I was one of those kids that was sent along to, what do they call it?
Religious instruction or Sunday school?
Sunday school. Sorry, yeah, there you go. And
I never miss. Every Sunday, off I go.
Well, still to this day.
To this day.
Just hoping.
Jesus wants me for a sunbeam, I sing. It's bloody good.
Well, I used to, attend the Sunday school, and I just never found it very convincing. I wasn't able. It's a little bit like watching a Gilbert and Sullivan musical. You have to be. People say, well, you have to be able to suspend belief, or suspend disbelief in order that you can enjoy it. And I used to think you've got to actually suspend thinking if you're going to accept a lot of the stuff that they're trying to tell you. And even as a little kid, I didn't have the ability to suspend it, because I was always just far too cynical.
Having been made brutally aware of mortality, do you fear death more or less?
I think less. And I'll tell you something else, but my father died 9 years ago now. And he provided a remarkable example to me and to others around him, of course, including my immediate family, of how to die with real dignity. Dad didn't do a deathbed conversion and have a two bob each way and accept Christ into his life or anything like that. He kept cracking jokes and amusing people right up to the very end. And when I told him that I was worried about how it would be after he'd gone, he said, "Mate, I'm not afraid or anything. You understand that? I'm not afraid or anything. I know what's going to happen." And he said, "And I'll tell you how it's going to be after I'm gone." He said, "You'll draw a cartoon and you'll ring me up to tell me about it, and I won't be there to answer the phone."
Wow.
And he said, "That's the only difference. That's the only difference it's going to make. I won't be there."
That's your father. I want to go out on this chat with a bit of music.
Beaut.
And I understand this is something that your son Jasper introduced you to. It's called It's Cold Out.
Well, yeah, Jasper spent, my son Jasper, when he was 19, spent a year studying double bass in Cologne. And I think he suffered a lot while he was there. He was lonely, and it was very cold out because Cologne can be a very cold place. And when he came back after that year, he made an album of songs that he'd written while he was there. And Jasper has a remarkable knack for melancholy.
It's a great emotion.
It is, and he's even many years later. He's now he's been living in New York for nearly 6 years, and I mean he writes all sorts of music. This was primarily jazz at that time, and still there's that element of melancholy in just about everything that he writes. It's something.
Well,
I
that's
really
the last thing that the Gladdies and the Potties are going to hear. We're going to play Jasper's music. And Bill, thanks for this.
Thank you very much, Phil.
It's lovely talking to you.
It's great talking to you.
Bill Leake on Late Night Live.